Hi guys, thanks a lot for you all coming down tonight. We're going to have an exciting evening. Oh, there's a picture of me. Yeah, I'm the general manager here of Europe with the Mills Fabrica. So just in case you didn't know what the Mills Fabrica is and you've never been here before, we are a incubation and investment fund focused on investing in companies within the apparel industry, but from manufacturing, supply chain and textile side and production side of the business, because if we are able to support fixing what's behind, let's say, the velvet curtain, everything in front of it doesn't really have to think about being sustainable, because everything they're using from the materials and everything like that are good to go. They still have to think about being sustainable and other things, but you know, the material side, let's say. And we have two pillars that we focus on. One is fashion tech, we call textile, which is the manufacturing side of the fashion industry. The other one is agri-tech. But today, in this space we're in here today, this is our event space. We have a co-working space upstairs. We also have an innovation gallery, which I think you've all had a look at today. And we're really honored to be here today with Hong Kong Trade Development Council, as well as Hong Kong Economic Trade Office. So, two companies dear to our heart, because we were actually founded in Hong Kong in 2018. So it's nice to have them here and be able to showcase, which we'll talk about more, 6 designers from Hong Kong here in our space in the UK, all looking through the lens of sustainability. So I just want to say thank you a lot. Thanks all for all being here. If you have any questions, come find me later. And looking forward to the panel and the great event. And I'm going to pass over to Guildford over here. He's going to talk about a few things about his business and how it's running. There you go.
Nikita, Daisy, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us at the event today, at this showcase today. We are also my office, the Economic and Trade Office, is a Hong Kong government's office here based in London. And we are very happy to co-organize this showcase together with the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. And we are also really very grateful to our event partners, the Mills Fabrica, as well as the Hong Kong Novotex, and our panelists tonight for your support. When Daisy approached me a few months ago about the idea of promoting sustainable fashion, I was immediately on board. Well, as a fashion lover, and I hope that you can notice it from my outfit. As a fashion lover, I do love rewearing and also buying some nice clothes as a treat sometimes. And so I see a strong need to support this showcase and preach the mantra, buy less and buy better. And now it's some promo time, okay? So my amateur opinion aside, it's also a huge pleasure for my office to showcase Hong Kong's fashion and design talents again after the pandemic. Thanks to our role, our status under the one country, two system, Hong Kong still remains a very cosmopolitan city with a dynamic and diverse cultural flair over the last 25 years. And our role as a center for international cultural exchange, this event is exactly an event for us to enhance this kind of exchange. This kind of exchange is to bridge East and West, and we hope that our role can be enhanced in future, which is supported by the national plan. And so please enjoy this showcase and hope that you can have a glimpse of Hong Kong's creativity here in London. And we are also keen to show you our efforts in applying scientific research in this showcase as well. Our chief executive announced his policy address last month, and he announced quite a number of new initiatives to make Hong Kong into an international innovation and technology center. And these measures particularly include promoting commercialization of R&D results, as well as pressing ahead with reindustrialization, particularly the transformation to advanced manufacturing. And I think this topic is very also dearest to the heart for manufacturing designers in Hong Kong as well. How to upgrade our manufacturing into more sustainable, into more dynamic, and more global brand And so we hope that through these events, we can showcase our efforts in this area. We hope that you can also give us your feedback as well after seeing our preliminary results. And finally, we hope that on top of these broad parameters, the panel discussion later on can give you some insights into our sustainable fashion scene in Hong Kong. And this showcase downstairs will run up. This talk will be just last for a few hours, not years. my speech will last for a few years. This talk will just last for a few hours, but the showcase downstairs will run until the end of December. So we are most welcome to come again, and please spread the word among your friends within your circle, and we will be even more excited if this showcase can entice you to go to Hong Kong and join our flagship event, Hong Kong Fashion Week, in April next year. That would be even better. Yeah. And for now, I think I better stop and let the experts speak. But please stick around after the panel discussion. And personally, I welcome any enlightenment from you about the fashion tips, so that hopefully I can become a better model next time. And wish you all an enjoyable evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to chatting to you all and sharing your insights your incredible insights with the audience today. So Francois, I'd love to start with you. I'd love to hear from you, given the background and your huge experience in the sustainable field, what you think of the UK fashion ecosystem currently, and I guess what unique capabilities it offers. That, you know, is there any insights you have on that? Anything that is of interest?
Good question.
I'm sure there's loads.
Let's see. Yeah, well, I think when we look at the Hong Kongese ecosystem for sustainable fashion, there's the diversity of actors, the proximity between those actors and the largest consumer and manufacturing market in the world, and the support from the local government, which we've just heard of, are kind of like the essential elements. So the actors, I think there's 4 key actors that we can find in Hong Kong. Large global manufacturers. Some of the largest manufacturers of apparel have actually their headquarters in Hong Kong, and often started manufacturing in Hong Kong and then went on to other parts in the world. And a lot of them are actually highly innovative and have done a lot of work on sustainability. Sometimes not necessarily very publicly, but behind the scenes actually quite a lot. When you think of Novotex, who's actually sponsoring this event, they've done a lot of work with Hong Kong Retail, with H&M, and with a number of others to actually develop innovative approaches. There's also Escale, who has done a lot of work to develop like super low impact manufacturing and very advanced social practices in their work, and many others. So there's a lot of like there's already a sort of very positive ecosystem when you want to find let's say sustainable advanced manufacturing. The second part is you also have the local or production headquarters for some very large global brands. You think of H&M, Gap, Nike, a lot of them actually have large production offices in Hong Kong, so you've got the proximity between the headquarters of a manufacturer and a pool of talent from the brands, and then you have an innovation ecosystem. I think that innovation ecosystem has been definitely accelerated by the Mills Fabrica. I think providing like one space where this ecosystem could gather and gain visibility definitely worked, and I think the Mills Fabrica is doing a lot of work to get the benefits of the geography to actually combine the innovations and some of the large manufacturers that are in the region. And the last aspect is in Hong Kong you also find a kind of leading applied research center, which is the Hong Kong Research Institute in Textiles and Apparel, which has actually partnered behind the scenes for a lot of innovations that we've seen in the textile space, whether it's in recycling or for other aspects in the manufacturing space. And I guess that leads to that other point, which is the proximity of all those actors really enable different types of collaboration and different types of projects. So when you think of a very flagship project that is the garment-to-garment recycling technology that H&M piloted in the store in Stockholm, and that's been actually hosted at the Mills Fabrica from day one. That stemmed from a partnership between the H&M Foundation, Novotex, and the Hong Kong RITA, all bringing different elements of the puzzle together to create what is a fairly exciting technology that is able to take an old t-shirt and turn it back into a new t-shirt within the space of 2 container ships. It might be even smaller now. I haven't seen it in a while. And the last aspect is the support from the Hong Kongese government. I mean, the Hong Kong Research Center is heavily supported by the Hong Kongese government, and there's a huge policy agenda that really is supportive of advancement in technology and research in the space of sustainable textile.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Francois. So Nina, as a real pioneer in the sustainable textile space, I think it's fair to say, can you share any insights you have on particular trends and innovations you're excited about at the moment? And I guess anything in Asia particularly that you might have noticed that you want to share with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yes, absolutely. So the Future Fabrics Expo is what perhaps some of you have attended, which is a showcase for textiles that are sustainably and responsibly produced. And our sort of motto is to diversify the fiber basket. And it's really about to move away from anything that is synthetics based, that is reliant on virgin polyester. As we know right now is the COP27 negotiations going on right now in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it's all about, well, it's not all about, but we would like it to be very much centered on stopping to use fossil fuel and having extraction of fossil fuels. And of course the fashion industry is very much connected to that, because what we're wearing, or what many of us are wearing, is polyester, and so that's actually made from fossil fuels. And so at the Future Fabrics Expo we're trying to show alternatives to anything that is synthetic. At the moment more than 60% of the sort of fiber basket is actually synthetics based. And so what we have at the Future Fabrics Expo is anything from of course recycled, as you were referring to. A lot of that comes from actually from Asia, but we have a lot in terms of I would say agricultural waste is one of the things that we've shown at the recent Future Fabrics Expo, which is very much reliant on working with different industries, such as the food industry, and reusing agricultural waste or food residues. So that could be rice husks or wheat straw, or anything that really is an untapped potential, and making that into fibers for textiles. Or we have a lot of course, natural fibers that are very much an alternative to cotton. So again, from Asia comes a lot of hemp, actually. So there's, for example, cottonized hemp, which has a very much of a softer feel, which can be greatly blended with ideally organic cotton, but it is a good blend with other fibers used for denim, for example, and that immediately reduces the environmental impact from, let's say, 100% cotton garment to perhaps 50% with bast fibers, so hemp, linen, or flax rather, which is what linen is made of. So these are the sort of textiles that we're very much promoting. But of course there's also a lot of innovations, a lot again focused on being alternatives to plastic. And of course we all have heard probably about these amazing new fibers, whether that is mycelium, fibers from mycelium, whatever leather alternatives. We focus a lot on regenerative agriculture as a way forward for producing natural fibers. So yes, it's an exciting space, and we call it hashtag material revolution in one word.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nina. So Brooke, we were having an interesting conversation earlier, I guess, about the perceptions actually on how Western and Asian clothing manufacturing differ, and perhaps it's not actually as black and white as we think. I'd love you to share a little bit more on that with the audience.
Sure, yes. So this particular topic is one I'm very passionate about, because I've worked in the supply chain before I became a journalist. So I used to work sourcing materials and sourcing yarns and making textiles. And I've spent quite a lot of time in factories over the years, some in Europe, some in Asia. And I've observed from both vantage points the vantage point of being inside of the supply chain and working with brands, and also being outside from the brand perspective, looking back towards the supply chain. And I've observed over time and through my journalistic research that there are some very stubborn perceptions that the fashion industry holds. Let me say, when I say the fashion industry, I mean brands or brand-led points of view that are usually in Europe or in the US. There's a perception that there's somehow an inherently higher value and lower impact associated with products made in Europe or the US versus products made in Asia. And it simply doesn't bear out in the data. It's a real problem that we have in the industry where we don't recognize the talent and the scientific rigor and the application of commercialized technologies in the supply chain that are solving the problems we face today. So this is, if I don't get any other message across tonight, I hope I do. My ambition is beyond just getting one point across. But a really salient one is that it is not a binary situation where products made in Asia are less sustainable than products made in Europe or the US. It's for a number of reasons, but I'll maybe leave it there for now. I don't know if you have a follow-up question, Anne-Marie, or whether I should elaborate.
I mean, I think we'd love to hear a little bit more on it actually now, because I think it's fascinating. I mean, I think, why do you think these perceptions have sort of continued and still continue in the industry, that we immediately think if something's made in Italy, that's proper luxury? If some, you know, I'm just curious to know, I mean, is that just very good PR on the from the brands, or why do you think this is still an issue?
Well, it's at least in part because of marketing, as you say. I mean, Made in Italy is a phenomenally successful brand in itself. But fortunately, I wrote a book about this last year, so I'm fairly well briefed.
Can you share the book with us?
I can. It's actually, I was commissioned to write it by a company called Blue Sign, which is a chemical auditing company. And it's actually free. So anyone who is interested, just follow me on LinkedIn and I can share the link with you to the book. And the book explores the last 20 years of sustainability efforts in the industry. And I had to interview 25 experts, ranging from Ryan Gallett from Patagonia to some of the biggest chemical suppliers, Huntsman and ZDHC, and a lot of people. And what I learned was that back in the 60s, 70s, brands decided to outsource their supply chains. They didn't want to own their means of supply anymore. They didn't want to make their own products. So instead of producing their own products and sourcing their own materials, they outsourced that to manufacturers and the supply chain in Asia, where it really offloaded a lot of the brand's issues, a lot of the difficulties, a lot of the expense, the complexity, the innovation, the R&D, like the heart and soul of making things is in those phases. So by outsourcing that from the US and Europe to Asia, it was a sort of handing off of the supply chain, if you like. And the point of view of the brands that had handed this off was that we are the brands and we will create and sell the products, and we will be in the business of selling image and selling products rather than making things. So this is where a very clear line is drawn between what a brand does and takes responsibility for, and what the supply chain does and what it takes responsibility for. So here you can see already a sort of divide occurring, and a very sort of imbalanced power between those commissioning the product or sourcing the product and those making it. And this is exactly why we have arrived at situations like those that we all know about happening in Bangladesh, in Rana Plaza. So you can see the outcome of that kind of labor arbitrage, that way of kind of like going for the cheapest price and not really valuing the work. So there's a much bigger sort of set of things to sort of unpack here. The other thing related to this that's so critical about this discussion is that the majority of the impact of products, fashion products, is in the materials, as Nikita has already mentioned, and also Francois touched on it too. So when I say most, I mean there's data to back this up. Again, I can share it. There's a database, a globally averaged database on apparel impacts that very clearly demonstrates that around 70 to 80% of the impact of a product, an apparel product, is in the textile phase, from spinning to weaving to dyeing to finishing. So when we talk about sustainability, we have to understand that it has to be delivered in the supply chain in partnership with those facilities. And those are the facilities that have the expertise, the knowledge, the skill, and the talent to deliver it. So we cannot be of the mindset, in Europe we're sustainable, in Asia they're not, because it's simply not true, and it will in no way get us to where we need to go to solve the emissions problem, which, like I said, 80% is in that phase of the supply chain.
Thank you very much for that. Fascinating stuff, actually. And Daisy, you know, following on from all the insights we've had from the team, I'd love to hear a little bit from you, as someone on the ground, I guess, what Hong Kong is doing to facilitate growth in the sustainable industry. Any particular activations or innovations that you'd like to talk about?
Well, thank you, Emery. And I think, like what all the panelists here mentioned, that the Mills Fabrica has done a lot of work in Hong Kong to drive this movement. But in terms of the Hong Kong government side, actually, we have been very supportive of the sustainable fashion industry. So, for example, we have the CreateSmart Initiative, is a funding provided by the Hong Kong government to support industry players. They would like to participate or organize event that is promoting the sustainable fashion industry. So, for example, the Red Dress Award is supported by this initiative. And also, Hong Kong government has pledged a green tech fund. So since 2020, Hong Kong government has put 200 million Hong Kong dollars, about 20 million pounds, to support research, R&D, and also commercializations of anything related to green technologies. And since last year, 2022 and 2023, the policy address, the Hong Kong government is injecting another extra 200 million Hong Kong dollars, which is 20 million pounds, into this fund to promote green tech, to help decarbonizations. So you can see the passion and also the devotions of the Hong Kong government is helping it. And also going back to what Bruce just mentioned from the supply chain point of view, from the manufacturers, the Hong Kong government is also supporting a program called the Cleaner Production Partnership Program to help Hong Kong-based manufacturer to produce in a cleaner and greener way. And there's already 31 billion pounds putting aside for this program. So you can see a lot of funding supported by the Hong Kong government, which haven't been really promoted maybe before this event. So I think we are very honored here today to tell people what Hong Kong government is actually doing. And in the latest policy address, the Hong Kong government has pledged the next 15 to 20 years, we are going to putting aside 24 million pounds to promote carbon decarbonizations. So the Hong Kong government is actually setting up a new office called the Climate Change and Decarbonizations Office to facilitate and to help to coordinate all these measures. So you can see the Hong Kong government is really doing something on that.
That's very impressive, fantastic. So Francois, back to you. We know obviously there's been challenges in the Asian market in the past few years, I mean particularly around the pandemic and obviously other issues. Do you have any advice or insights for brands on looking to maybe establish a base in Hong Kong or Asia or vice versa? How can brands in Hong Kong expand into the UK market? What could that look like? And what could that look like for the consumer as well?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And I think it builds on what you were saying, Brooke, which is the difference in perception. I think that's the difference in perception from a brand perspective based on where things are made. But there's also different, let's say, customer reception to different messaging that's happening in different markets. So what we see is a messaging around sustainability and the sustainability of a product has higher chances of sticking in terms of commercial terms in the UK than you would have in an Asian market. I was at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation before, and we commissioned quite a large study working with the Chinese Textile and Apparel Coalition CNTAC. I never remember exactly what it stands for. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, we work with them to really look at what were the perception and the degree of penetration of sustainability within the population in China, and what we found is actually that at that stage it wasn't necessarily a selling argument, and even going beyond that, the attractiveness and stigma around resale or what we would call more broadly circular business model was still a lot higher than we would see in Western markets, and the pace of adoption of those new models was much slower. And when we did some studies about predicting how circular business model would grow over time, we could see inflection points and exponential growth in Western markets around Europe and the US, and that model that we did showed a much slower rate of progress in the Asian market due to those stigma and difference. But on the flip side, there's been a lot of positive examples that actually this doesn't necessarily have to be true. Redress, which you mentioned, is actually holding a pop-up store on resale at the moment in Hong Kong, the success of which might provide very valuable learnings around how these predictive model can evolve. And there was also an example from the Mills Fabrica at the time, where they have a similar to here, sort of educational store space, and part of that was dedicated to second-hand clothing, except that nowhere could you see that it was second-hand. Everything felt like it was new and exciting and varied and fun. And actually people who would say that they would never consider second-hand were actually shopping in that store because they were kind of tricked, or they didn't know that, or they didn't know, positive manipulation is still manipulation, but it's positive. They didn't know that they were buying second-hand, but actually that's one of the ways in which you can kind of break. So one of the elements of that stigma is there's a cultural aspect to it that has to be recognized, but there's also a marketing aspect to it, where if you want to grow a consumer market, if you stigmatize keeping stuff for too long or reselling stuff, you actually accelerate that consumer market, which has been fairly done. So there's two aspects to the conversation. That pop-up try to tackle the second one, which is more on the marketing aspect, but the cultural aspect has to be recognized also about what comes with products that are being resold.
Fantastic, thank you, Francois. So, Nina, in your experience leading the Future Fashion Expo, how receptive do you think consumers and brands are to the concept of regenerative fashion and textile diversification? It's a complicated subject, isn't it, if you know, as a consumer or a brand. And what, in your opinion, do you think could be done to grow awareness and I guess make it just more understandable in a way, or explain to people what it is in a... What do you think needs to happen from your point of view?
We approach it more as a business-to-business platform. So what we do at the Future Fabrics Expo is trying to inspire brands. So it's all about showing what the future could look like by having our innovation hub, which really is supposed to show them emerging trends and where things are going, and having a lot of educational information and raising awareness. But at the same time, we try to show as much as possible commercially available, more sustainably produced textiles, because ultimately, there is no more time to have excuses and to say I can't find the right material, because they really are there. There has been so much progress made, and the solutions are there. We just need to have everyone moving faster and at scale, as we all know. And so that's what we try to do. We try to have a tactile display, so that really, we're trying to inspire fashion brands. So ultimately, these are creatives who want to touch and feel those materials. It's no good to tell them what they should do. You just have to show them and make them, show them the solutions. So that's what we try and do. And then, of course, ultimately, with all the educational information that we're providing, that should make it easier for a brand to then communicate it to their customers. So ultimately, that would be the ideal scenario, where you are really, this sort of journey of inspiring everyone who is buying these garments that are better made, to then, feel good about it, and to this could have a knock-on effect to the rest of what they're doing, perhaps. So when you're having things made from waste, or textile to textile recycling, what does that mean? And just having a knock-on effect on how you're behaving, perhaps in your general day-to-day life. So I think ultimately, yes, you want to then inspire the customer and make them to be an agent of change as well. So I think there's a whole sort of
And are you seeing that moving in the right direction now with brands? Are you noticing more brands? The million-dollar question.
Well, I can only say what we experience. So yes, absolutely, we have more brands than ever coming to the Future Fabrics Expo. Absolutely, there are more.
Because
and
it
more
is the
mills and
future. It has to
suppliers.
happen, doesn't it? There isn't an alternative to it, really. At this
Well, I
stage.
think it just needs to be faster, and there's no more time to waste around and talk about what would be ideal. We know that the textiles are out there. That's, for example, right now there's a textile exchange conference in the US, and Claire Bergkamp, who is the COO there, always refers to it saying, ultimately, we have known for 20 years since textile exchange exists, we have been saying the same thing. There are these solutions, and we can beat ourselves up in a room and saying how exactly that should be done. And it's important to have all of these. The data needs to be right, and the verification needs to be right. But we know what the solutions are. We just need to go and actually do it. And so I think, yes.
So, Brooke, big question here. In your opinion, is the industry doing enough to achieve its vision of net zero emissions by 2050? Also, what role can public policy play in accelerating this? Two questions, but kind of the same question.
Well, luckily you don't need my opinion because we have the data. So, yes, so it's such a big topic. I write about it every day. I research about it, I write about it, I interview people, I write about it every single day. So it's a topic that I constantly think about. And I think sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that more is happening because there are more sustainable products, there are more brands talking about sustainability, there are more brands signing up to science-based targets, more of these different things. But actually what it comes down to is what I mentioned earlier. And that is the recognition that the vast majority of the emissions attributed to the fashion and textile industries are generated in the material phase. And if we do not address that, we simply will not achieve the sector-wide climate targets. And all of the resale, rental in the world will not get us there. I know it's not necessarily a popular thing to say, because it is important that people feel that there are things they can do. But part of the reason why we have been aware, I mean, we're in the 6th IPCC report now. This has been happening for decades before that. We have known very well the scientific basis of climate change. And we have, in the fashion and textiles industry, actually ignored the root cause of the emissions. To take a little step towards how this plays out for brands and to understand what it means, whether or not brands have committed and whether or not they will achieve their own net zero targets. The critical thing to understand is that brands don't own their supply chain, and it's within their supply chain that most of the emissions happen. So it is critical to understand that if a brand says, right, we're going to reduce our Scope 3 emissions, which is all the emissions in their supply chain, and that's usually 90-something% of their emissions, then they are committing to a target that they personally can't deliver because they don't own the supply chain. The supply chain is who they source from. So in order to solve that emissions problem, there needs to be a different approach to how emissions are understood and handled within the industry. It could no longer be a discussion about, we've set science-based targets, we've dealt with Scope 1 and Scope 2, which is a couple of % of our emissions. Now we're going to ask our suppliers to implement all the infrastructure needed to switch from fossil-based energy to renewables, because how will they pay for that? How will they pay for infrastructure to transform their entire energy supply to renewables when it's a competitive market and everybody wants the lowest possible unit price? This is exactly how we end up standing in the same place, saying the same thing. looking at the same numbers. Every year when I go to the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, I feel a bit reticent, a bit reluctant, because I have to look at what's happened in the year before and I have to say, right, all of the things that were talked about last year, all of the pledges that were made, all of the commitments that were discussed, what's the sum total, what's the net effect? More emissions, more products, more volume. We're not looking at the right things in order to solve the problems that we need to solve to get to net zero.
Thank you very much. I think everyone agreed that was lots to think about. So Daisy, I guess, going on from Brooke's sort of brilliant analysis of where we're at the moment, in terms of really, you know, there does need to be a mindset change with consumers, and we know that is happening and we can see it and people are a lot more aware now. What is the appetite in Hong Kong amongst the designer community and consumers for creating a more sustainable industry? And how do you see, can you see meaningful change and development, and what does that look like?
And I just want to touch on what Brooke just brought, such a big topic about nothing is changing. And this is just a side story. My daughter was 9 last Sunday. We were celebrating her birthday. And then she said to me, "Mommy, I want to be your age." I said, "Why? I want to be your age." And then she said, "No, Mommy, you don't need to live with climate change." So I think the awareness of climate change is really, really rising, even to my daughter who is only 9, and they already learn a bit from the TV. And I think there's a rising concern, and also from that generation, which is quite heartbroken when I heard that. So going back to your question about the Hong Kong awareness, I think tonight we are showcasing what Hong Kong fashion designers, and we are changing, we are trying to drive this positive movement. And in terms of consumer, and also I think to my surprise, because you know from what I heard from my daughter, I realized the awareness here in the Western side is very, very high. But in Hong Kong, Polytechnic University and also with the Uniqlo, they actually done a research earlier this year showing that 80% of the consumer actually they look into the brand awareness of sustainability. And about 60% of the interviewee, they're actually willing to pay a premium for a green and sustainable product. And about more than 50% of the interviewee, they actually understand the SDG, the Sustainability Development Goals set by the United Nations. So I think, of course, maybe compared to the Western part, we are still not as advanced from like what my daughter just told me. But we are actually, the awareness is up there.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for, judging by the hand signal.
We'll do one more.
We can do one more, well, that's great. So I'll keep this one short, but there's been so many brilliant and very varied insights. But I'd like to go to Nina actually and say, you know, again, following on from Brooke's comments, shining a light really on the very present issue the industry still has with greenwashing. What do you think needs to happen in order to ensure consumers have more tools to make informed decisions? And I think actually that's a question I could ask of all of you in your very different, I know yours is more B2B, but I do think it's a really pressing issue that I still think there's a real disconnect, and I think consumers really, really want to make those changes. And listen, I get confused. I'm sure everyone in this audience does. There is so much information out there. There's conflicting information, as we were talking about. I mean, I guess, you know, there isn't, you know, a magic bullet. But what do you think is the one thing that could change to make this, just to make it easier for people to make considered choices? Yeah. Sorry, that was a very long question, but I'd actually love
I'll give you a short
all
answer.
of you to.
I think one of the main things.
I think it's, you know, really, really big part of the conversation. Yeah. Sorry, I've forgotten to put my microphone on.
I think one of the main things, and that very much connects also to what Brooke was saying, is that ultimately the prices are wrong. You know, that is where the thing comes in, and that's what would address a lot of things that also Brooke was just saying. is that you know, the cheap fashion isn't really showing the true price, and that is ultimately the main thing. So if policymakers would start putting into first gear and address the issue with pollution and actually make you pay for that, so the polluter has to pay for the cleanup cost, all of these sort of things, then the price will be reflecting that. And so the bad products, let's simplify it, and the good things are just having a very clear price difference, not to the detriment of those who are doing the good things, but actually to the detriment of those who are actually polluting. And that is one of the fundamental things. But to make that happen, of course, policy changes have to come in, and ultimately, this is very topical right now, we have to stick to what the science tells us. And we know we have to halve emissions by 45% by the end of this decade. So we can talk about 2050, but actually it needs to happen now, and it needs to happen today. And so this is where I think the consumers and everyone who's making buying decisions every day, they just need to think about what is the price of that garment, and can that actually reflect what is really going into this from a materials perspective, but also the entire labor question. You know, how can something cost $3? You just have to think to yourself, is that even possible? So this polluter pays principle is a really important thing, but it will depend on legislation, and that is all wrapped up also in this decisive decade that we're in. And so meeting those climate targets in, you know, halving those emissions almost by the end of the decade is really, that's where it comes down to the why in the next couple of days. You know, what are the policymakers actually, what are the government leaders going to decide? Are we sticking to 1.5 degrees or not?
Francois.
That's a good question. And we do a lot of work with people communicating, right? That's a big part of what BPCM does. And we've been helping companies communicate about sustainability for a decade now. And well, first, as a company, we've drawn a very clear line that we wouldn't be engaged in any form of greenwashing, which sometimes is an interesting choice, right? Because you kind of sacrifice revenues in the light of what you don't believe should happen. And I think it's a kind of decision that needs to be like thought through for a lot of businesses. That is, where do you draw the line, and where do you say we are ready for the sacrifices that this commands in light of the belief that we hold true. Now, when it comes to communication, there's a few best practices, and you're talking about regulation. What's fairly interesting is in the past few months, there's a few interesting development in regulation that have happened. The Competition and Market Authority in the UK has edited a clear guidance, and this time it's not just a guidance, it's legally enforceable. So brands who break the guidance can be pursued by the market authority for false claims. And this established very clear setup around how do you communicate sustainability. And we also see in Europe that a lot of brands are being sued or commanded to take down claims. We've seen that in Netherlands, in France. We've seen it. I mean, we see a lot of headlines with H&M, but Adidas was part of it. Nike's been part of it. There's been a lot of action there. We usually recommend 4 simple rules. The first one is to be very precise in your claims. It's not like, oh, we are sustainable by design. That doesn't mean anything. So focus on the attributes of what's actually sustainable. The second one is to be able to back up the claims on sustainability. So are you using a certain standard? Are you using, like, do you have demonstrable proof that what you're doing is effectively sustainable? The third one is that quantitative is always better than qualitative. Saying most of our products are sustainable is bullshit. Saying 70% of our products are is better. Saying our products are made of 70% more sustainable materials is even better. And the last one I forgot, so that's terrible.
That's okay. Those 3 were pretty good.
Those 3 were pretty good, but yeah. So it's basically having like a system that you can follow when you make your claims that actually reduces it. And actually, what we find is in the context where you can actually be held accountable for some claims that you made, it's always easier to be proactive than to be reactive, because as soon as you need to define yourself, you open yourself to even more accusation and more research. I mean, I love quoting what happened to HSBC this summer, because they had a guy who went to a conference and said that he didn't really give a shit if Miami was 6 feet underwater. and well, he subsequently got fired. But what that did is actually all the executives at HSBC went on the record, said, well, this is not the view of the company. We hold ESG very high on our agenda. And what people started to do is do more research in exactly what HSBC was doing, and found out that they were one of the top 3 financiers of oil and gas projects. So that put them in even more problems, and it created a sort of vicious cycle where actually it's getting really hard to escape. So being very deliberate in the way you communicate and be very practical and almost scientific in what you're putting out will prevent having to defend even more.
And Brooke, is there anything you'd like to add?
So yes, it's such a complicated space for consumers, and one of the main reasons for that is that sustainability is a marketing term, and it's really a term that's used to brand things, and rather than being the absolute term that it sounds like, sustainable, it's actually it's not. It's far more complicated than that in a marketing sense, the way that it's being used. So it's actually one of the reasons why recently with my co-founder I started a new business, and we are publishing intel and analysis that isn't marketing driven about sustainability, so that it's much easier for the reader to sort what's a marketing label from what's actually based on data and scientific evidence. So I'll give you a little example that might be interesting for the audience. Last week I published an article on Forbes which was about leather. And there's been, because of the huge success of vegan marketing, there's become a sort of widespread belief that vegan means sustainable. But unbeknownst to many consumers, for vegan leather to perform anything like animal leather, it requires synthetic polymers. So almost all vegan leather is plastic with some plants in it. But consumers don't know that, because the word sustainable and the word vegan are used as sort of general shorthand for this is good, this is a better product. The flip side of that is that there's a food industry that produces millions of hides every year, not because hides are worth lots of money, but because beef and other meat's worth lots of money. In the US, the beef industry is the most lucrative food industry. So beef's not raised for its hide, it's raised for its food. But a byproduct of that is skins, is hides. And if people buy vegan leather instead of buying animal leather, animal hides have to be incinerated or landfilled, which generates methane and toxic microbes and all sorts of other environmental issues. I'm not an advocate for the meat industry, but I am an advocate for clear, data-driven analysis that gives people the information they need to make an informed decision. So that's just a little example there of how confusing it can be for consumers and how necessary it is to understand.
To have the data.
Yes, the data and the big picture, and to sort of draw on scientific analysis. I'm so passionate about science and about data and using that to inform decisions rather than opinion or kind of a couple of examples or marketing sort of language that's compelling but doesn't have any evidence.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Just going back on the greenwashing, I think today I read the news. This is a bit of a side story that is apparently an activist saying the COP27 is the biggest greenwashing campaign. But so just going back to that, and I totally agree with all the panelists here. I think since a few years ago, I pay a lot of attention, even though I'm not a sustainable expert like yourself. But I remember going on a business trip, and then I saw a big billboard or advertisement about a big, very famous brand, like beverage brand. I'm not going to name which one. And then there's a big logo saying all our products are sustainably sourced in the UK. And then when you look into the details of all the ingredients of that brand, actually only 1 or 2 UK ingredients. All of the other ingredients are sourced actually in India, America. So that is a very, very big greenwashing. And I think there are lots of education also in the Asian market. I think a lot of the things that education about greenwashing is still a big topic. And what I could see there is that in terms of, I want to see more collaboration with the Western side and also the Hong Kong side or Asian side to have this understanding with a very aligned level, that we know what we are doing. And in terms of investment, I know there's some expertise in investment here, also on the investment point of view. So what I've just mentioned at the beginning, Hong Kong has a lot of funding. The Hong Kong government providing a lot of funding, and also there are lots of investment opportunities. So with the funding, investment, and also technology, the Mills Fabrica in Hong Kong are doing, the Hong Kong retail are doing, I think it's quite a good synergy from different angles, investment, funding from the government, and also from the technology side. And I think what the Western side has a lot to offer in terms of knowledge and regulations too. So we will love, Gilbert and myself, will love to see more collaborations, and we try to facilitate that as much as we could. And this is why the reason we are here today. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much to all of you. That was incredibly inspiring ideas and insights and expertise. I think everyone will agree. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
I think after all this interesting and insightful discussions from all our panelists, so thank you, Anne-Marie, Francois, Nina, and Brooke, for giving us such an insightful discussion. And I hope that after the hearing from what the expertise just said, you understand that Hong Kong is doing a lot in terms of the fashion, sustainable fashion industry, and the way forward in the fashion industry as well. And thank you everyone here tonight to join us this evening. And I believe that after hearing from all of us, you will see the Hong Kong government is taking this movement very, very seriously. And tonight, to demonstrate what we are doing to put words into action, I'm very pleased to share that we are bringing the works of 6 very, very talented Hong Kong fashion designers to London at the Mills Fabrica. And they are at the forefront to drive the positive movement. And they are trying so hard to educate, and also to educate the consumers in Asia and in Hong Kong to make conscious and also design-led purchase. So I'm very honored, we are all very honored here today to unveil the works of these 6 very talented Hong Kong fashion designers. So first, we have the Mountain Yam. His collection is based on sustainability, using responsible materials and also local craftsmanship. Then we have Betty Couture. I'm actually, Gilbert is wearing the work of Betty. So, yeah. And Betty is very aware. She is always striving to bring awareness of the environmental issues. And what she is trying to do is reduce the fabric wastage using a very special pattern design when she make her collections. Then we have Angus Choi. His collection is born from the creativity and imagination and efficacy. And of course, we also have Sun San. Sun San, you can see from her collection, it brings the vibrancy and also is very playful design, because she aims to promote a sense of optimism and also positivity to the world. And then we have V Visi, all her products and also garments and are all sustainable and also ethical, based on the guided principle of sustainability, innovation, and also local craftsmanship. So I think I've covered all of them. I haven't missed anyone, right? Yes, and so I'm very honored. We are all very honored to bring the works of them today. And unfortunately, they won't be here with us today in person, but they are here in spirit. And they are very eager to inspire us with their sustainable idea through the works and also through the clips here that we are going to show.
The future of sustainable fashion, I don't think we will ever turn back to not thinking about sustainability across the board. It's the way to do business nowadays. It has to start from the root. So from the design process, we have to consider how to incorporate sustainability into the first step. We wanted to come up with a process to take care of our own internally generated textile waste and recapture the value. That's how we began the process of thinking about the Billy.
Sustainable is actually a must. We design core items and we try to use sustainable materials as well. So items that are very long lasting and that actually represent us.
We also use some of the dead stock materials and some of the old stock items to restyle them, and we brand them or we create them into a new pieces.
Our new collection themed as roll, scissor, paper, and we use the game to express the idea of recycling more and minimizing waste through a humorous design. And I believe that recycling cycles creates an all-win scenario for the earth and humanity and fashions.
Education is very important. Hopefully, we can reach more young local talent and help each other, not just with putting out beautiful designs that are sustainable, but also to promote the whole idea of being environmentally friendly and promoting the idea of sustainable fashion going forward.
The reason we create and cares is because we are trying to apply and advocate the sustainable concept in a more daily life aspect and also in the community. We would like to create something more powerful and with more impact that can really affect the industry to create a better future and also a better environment.
I started to create my own paper pattern from geometric patterns. So I just want to reduce the waste of the fabric during the making process. As a fashion designer, we have the responsibility to tell the consumers how does sustainable fashion work and what sustainable fashion is.
Every season we will have quite a lot of bunch book or like this fabric swatch. Actually, it's really valuable materials. For the first season, the patchwork, we using the swatch and then to remake to become a garment. For my second collection, I think of that not just on materials but also engage to the community to help the retired peoples and the local women to make our collection.
It's a really wonderful opportunity for us to be showcased in London this time for 1 month.
So in fact, I did miss out one designer that is Blind by J-Dub. Actually, I'm wearing the scarf today, so I don't know why I could forget. So Blind by J-Dub, their collection is based on really a mix of Eastern and Western influences and using very special modern motif and also very surprising silhouette to create a wearable piece of art. So these are all the 6 very, very talented Hong Kong designers, and I do hope that you will spend some time to experience and appreciate their pieces downstairs at the Mills Fabrica X. And I hope that you will find them, they are actually at the forefront of promoting this movement in Hong Kong. And if you do want to get in touch with them and if you want to explore business collaborations, do get in touch with us. Or any of us here, that we are happy to help to pass on the interest. The showcase will last until late December, so do bring your friends or business contact who is in this industry to have a look. And I would like to just take this opportunity to share that what we've just shared today, these amazing discussions, and we, the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, the HKTDC, we are here to help you to capture all these business opportunities in Hong Kong, Asia and China and beyond. And we do this through a lot of activities like today's, but also we hold our fashion events, like what Gilbert just mentioned, the Fashion Week, and also Center Stage every year. So I hope that you'll be able to go to Hong Kong to visit these shows next year. And these are all the amazing opportunities where you can meet like-minded individuals like yours. And we also have an AI-powered platform where you could find business partners who will meet sustainable product or ethical textile, apparel buyers and suppliers. So do talk to one of us today if you want any assistance. And last but not least, I would like to thank all the event co-organizer, the Hong Kong Economic Trade Office in London, with their very, very generous support, and also the event partner, the Mills Fabrica. Without you all, this won't happen today. And actually, the Mills Fabrica comes from the legacy of Hong Kong's Nanfang's group. So you are really the ideal partner for this campaign. And also we have a very good events partner that is Novatex. You can see that you are all bringing this coaster home today. This souvenir is sponsored by them. It's actually made up of upcycle yarn by the milling system, which was showcased in the video just now. And last, definitely not least, is I want to send my heartfelt gratefulness to all the whole team here, Joey, Anson, Matthew, Richard, and also Alicia. All of you have done an amazing job to make this happen. And also the Mills Fabrica, Gabrielle, Nikita, and Amy, all of you to really go an extra mile to bring this showcase to everyone. So thank you very much. I'm not going to dwell on anymore. So to enjoy the showcase downstairs and also enjoy the party. Thank you.